presentation will now begin. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Item number 1 is citizens in. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to do the roll call?
Counselor Kadeem?
Here.
Counselor Pelliss here.
Yeah.
Chair Dion?
Here. First item is citizens' input. Do we have any citizens' input? Okay. Item 2, the minutes from February 1st, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes have been approved. Item number 3, order Michelle LaRuda, 37 Chicago Street, for the removal of 16 feet of curbing to the existing 16-foot driveway opening for the purpose of creating a horseshoe driveway, tabled on 2/1/22. I would entertain a motion to lift from the table.
Motion to lift from the table?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is, the order is lifted.
Madam Vice President,
Yes, sir.
if I may make a statement tonight, that Mr. Savigny is one of my friends. Mr. Savigny helped me out for 20, 25 years, sold tickets, helped me out with the meals. We go out to eat, we go shopping, we do everything. And before I get in a position that I have to explain myself, conflict of interest, I feel that this would be a conflict of interest to vote for this tonight. So I want to lay that on the table. That's why sometimes you have 9 councilors, you got 8 left. And that's my position. It was hard to decide what to do, but I felt, being with Ronnie today, it says, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's tough to do what I have to do, but I have to do it. And that's it. So I will be abstaining from the vote. And I don't feel that I should have any input as well. But I'm going to sit here and be quiet. With that, I yield.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your straightforwardness and honesty, and I'm sure everybody does, including Mr. Savigny. With that, Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah. Sorry.
Nice to see you all again.
Good to see you as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. For the record, my name is Dan Aguirre. I'm the city engineer for the city of Fall River, Massachusetts. Here this evening on a follow-up to the meeting that we had back in February. And at that time, we had a discussion about a few different proposals of how Ms. Arruda could proceed. And at that meeting, the subcommittee made the determination to table the matter until the applicant could put together some proposed plans of a few different scenarios and to pick up from where that conversation left off to come back and see you all today. So with Mrs. Arruda, I was able to sit down and put together her wishes. And I've got a couple of extras here too, if anybody, if Mr. Savigny would like a copy.
Now, I know at that meeting, whoops, I'm sorry, I'll wait till you get back. I know at that meeting, one of the things that was discussed was a buffer between the 2 properties.
That's
If,
correct.
in fact, a horseshoe driveway would go in,
That is correct.
that Mr. Savigny would want like a 6-foot buffer.
Right,
So
so-
the proposal would be amended to 10 feet instead of 6 feet, I
That-
believe?
That's correct. So what we were able to do is, with the help of Laura Ferrera from traffic, myself, the applicant, we went out, did some additional measurements, and I prepared this little exhibit for you. So I'll go through it. Let's start with the very top. Top plan, you'll see the red asterisk on every plan is the end of Mrs. Arruda's existing driveway. So just for orientation purposes, wherever you see a red star, that's concurrent in every plan, so you'll have an idea of where you are. So she currently has this existing driveway where you see the red star. To the left of that, you'll see Mr. Savigny's driveway to the west that accesses his existing parking lot. You go to the next page, this would be a view, this would be the view on Chicago Street looking westerly. Again, the red star is the end of Mrs. Aruta's driveway. You see the existing curb section heading towards Stafford Road, and then the driveway for Mr. Savigny as well. The third sheet, looking in the opposite direction, is from Mr. Savigny's property, his driveway, looking easterly, and you see the red star where Mrs. Aruta's existing driveway is. The next two plan sets, sketches are option 1 and option 2. In both of these, again, you'll see the red star where the existing asphalt driveway is that services Mrs. Aruta's home at number 37 Chicago. And then westerly, you'll see the existing asphalt driveway that services Mr. Savigny's property. So the last month, we had a discussion about the reduction of the proposed 16-foot request down to 10. So that is consistent on both of these. I did have a discussion with Mrs. Aruta, and we came up with these two different options. Option number 1 coincides with Councilor Kadim's idea at the time, which was, can we just make the existing driveway add on an additional 10 feet? So the option 1 illustrates that, taking the existing driveway, extending it 10 feet to the west. That would provide a 4-foot buffer, a 20-foot space, and then about 8 feet plus or minus before we got Mr. Savigny's driveway. That's option number 1. You will also see at the top of this plan, working with the traffic department, we were able to create 2 new on-street spaces on the opposite side of Chicago by relocating a no parking sign that used to be on that existing utility pole. Laura went out and made some measurements and was able to move that sign westerly so that you see relocated no parking sign, and that was allowed us to create 2 additional spaces directly across the street from Mr. Savigny.
So in the original proposal, 1 parking space was going to be lost, but now 2 were gained, so essentially, in the long run, there's
A net gain
one.
of 1.
Correct.
In
Okay.
both scenarios,
No matter what the
option 1 and 2, there will be a net gain of 1 space. It's just logistically now what works better for Mrs. Aruta, Mr. Savigny, and how the committee would like to move it
Proceed.
forward if they want to grant the additional 10 feet. So option 1 is to create the adjacent driveway of 10 feet. And I'm sure Mrs. Aruta will explain this to you. Adding this in this location creates a little bit of an issue for her because it creates an area or a driveway in a location where she had put some substantial monies into some landscapes. So if you look at the very top picture, you'll see directly adjacent to the driveway, there's a little bit of a landscape feature directly to the left of her driveway, which she was trying to straddle that and put it on the other side. So option 1 is the idea that Councilor Kadim had. Mrs. Aruta, it's not her number 1 option because of the landscape feature that she had spent some money on. Option number 2 would be the scenario that Mrs. Aruta would ask the board to look at first. So again, we have the existing driveway. On both sides of that driveway provided a 4-foot buffer, the same 20-foot space. I thought it was very important that the spacing in between these 2 driveways is that we didn't do it in a manner that eliminated an additional space. So we had to spread those 2 driveways out enough to provide enough space to make up that 1 parking space. So that's why we have that 20-foot dimension in between the 2 driveways, a buffer of 4 feet on either side, a 10-foot opening, and then a 4-foot buffer to Mr. Savigny's driveway to the west. I am not here to tell you which one is better, which one is worse. I'm only here to present the facts to you, and that these were 2 scenarios that I discussed with Mrs. Aruta and told that I would present those 2 to you this evening.
So-
However, the committee wants to take that information and proceed, by all means do so.
Now, that 20 feet would allow for 2 vehicles to be
One.
parked? Only 1?
Yeah. So a normal parking space is 9 by 18.
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing parallel parking like this to a curb, where you're not coming in off of a driveway, we try to leave a little bit more maneuver room, so 20. And then the additional buffer is to make sure that no one is parking close to someone's driveway. So you've got some 4-foot, there is no magic number to that. Some cities and towns have an ordinance that you can't park within a certain distance to a driveway. I don't believe we have that
We do
ordinance.
not, no.
Maybe we should, but for now, this is a comfortable layout for both driveways to be able to back out. Both scenarios are, that people could back out of either driveway or pull in without having any difficulty whatsoever. And the last thing to note is, I went back historically to look at the development of the area in general. So when the development across the street happened, in this first area that we're looking at, there were 3 curb cuts closed for a total of 70 feet that used to service St. William's Church, different driveways. So that also closed up a number of curbs. So historically, there has been additional parking provided to this area. Is there ever enough? No,
No.
there's never. But this would, one, it would allow additional vehicles to be off of the street while providing new spaces on this lot in either scenario. They would have additional off-street spaces and a net gain of 1. Now, the net gain of 1, the 2 spaces across the street, could have happened regardless if this proposal was here at all. If somebody had ever brought it to the traffic department's attention, they could have resolved this on their own. It just happened to be concurrent with what we're proposing today. What happened was someone had knocked down the sign. Someone had, whether it was DPW or whoever, picked the sign up and put it on the closest utility pole. And that's why it got dragged so far down the street, because it was just convenient to use the existing pole rather than go and replace one.
Now, those 2 new spaces, are they on the side of the street for when there's a parking ban that would allow for parking, or are they on the side?
I believe, and let's take a look at the picture.
Mrs. Ferrera is here, we can, I think she knows the answer to that question.
I believe the hydrants are on,
They're on both sides.
Yeah.
Is it on
right.
both?
So where
That's what I thought,
we open up the new space is fine when there's parking, that's where they should be anyway.
Okay, so actually, they're also gaining parking spaces during a parking ban as well.
Correct.
well, they're not losing any on that side of the street because of the parking ban.
Right.
So they're not
So
gaining.
they're gaining 2
They
spaces.
gain 2.
Historically, yes. they would be
Historically
gaining
not,
two,
but,
yes,
yeah, with the recent developments, they gained 2.
That's correct.
Council Kadim, you?
Yeah, just a quick question. So the current spot here, so when we say net gain, so you were able to put 2 cars there, 2 vehicles?
No, across the street, we were able to add two
No, what I'm
vehicles.
saying currently here though. So where's the net gain of 1 then?
Because
'Cause we're
there's
still
2 across
maintaining-
the
We're losing
street.
1 on our side, and we picked up 2 across the street.
So here, the 20 feet,
We're still losing 1 space.
because you could have fit 2.
I'm still, yeah, I couldn't fit 3 before,
Okay,
so I could only fit 2.
right.
I'm losing
Gotcha,
1
okay.
and picked up 2 across the street.
I didn't think
So
it
it's
was-
not
I
a
didn't-
net gain on our side.
No, I know.
For the neighborhood, it's a net gain.
I just didn't realize, I guess I was under the assumption that you couldn't fit 2 vehicles there originally.
No, you could always fit 2 there before.
Okay.
yeah.
And then, I guess, what was the reasoning for Mr. Savigny? Was it 8 feet that he was looking for a buffer? So you got 4 feet?
At the end of the day, I believe he stated that he wouldn't be happy with anything. I
Okay.
believe, but I'm not, I don't want to speak for him.
All right, for some strange reason, I thought there was an 8-foot buffer he was looking for, I think.
I thought it was 6, but.
Maybe,
Mr. Savigny's here, we could invite him to answer those questions. Should we just have him go, you can just go to the microphone, right?
yep.
You can just go right to the microphone right there, that'll make it easier.
We can't figure out what you were saying on the maps, so we want to see it.
Yeah, you can come down, I'll go over with you. All right, so, in option 1 would be, here's the existing driveway.
Yeah.
They could add 10 feet just to that existing driveway. That would leave a spot. And then,
Where's my property? I'm looking, I always forget this is my yard.
but then all the words are upside down.
That's okay. I can fix it.
So here's your driveway.
Right,
So if they added 10 feet to their driveway now, which is what Council Kadim had proposed,
right.
that would leave them enough room for a 20-foot parking space, an 8-foot buffer, and then your driveway. So theoretically, it would leave on the side of your driveway 28 plus 4, 32 feet from driveway to driveway. 32 feet. So you could easily park a car in between and leave, now, I can't tell this person that they can't park within 8 feet,
Right.
but within that area is enough room.
What is the actual room between 2 cars should be? 24 feet, or be, no, you had two
No,
cars
well,
per
it should be
foot.
40 feet for two vehicles.
Yeah, 40 feet.
40 feet, so if that's what I'm saying, is it would be shy to create, that's why we're losing a space, because,
Okay, so it isn't 40 feet the way it is right now? And it would be 40, is it 40 feet now?
it would be
Oh,
10,
yeah, okay,
30,
yeah, yeah.
38, would be 42 right now, which is enough for two vehicles, without any buffer. So two vehicles is still kind of tight.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Well, can I say a few things here? And on gaining these two spots, first thing, there was no houses on Stafford Road.
Can you just speak into the mic?
Okay. First thing, there was no houses on Stafford Road. So these people on Stafford Road do not have a place to park if they have extra company or anything else. They abut Stafford, they abut Chicago Street, 100 feet. So that's somebody's side yard. So they have the right, if they have company or somebody over, to park. I can't stop them from parking on Chicago Street. So that's one issue I'm bringing up there, because there is no parking on Stafford Road, and they're really abutting Chicago Street. And since we opened that up there, we have the beauty parlor, they just park there, because now they're adjacent to the door, so this is, becomes, it's always, the people always park to the closest possible way to get to the building, so the place is, the beauty parlor is always, it's full there all the time. So, so I really didn't basically gain anything from there, because there were people to fill that in immediately, because the beauty parlor never had enough parking in the first place. And he was there 40 years, never had a problem with parking. That's what I'm saying at that point. I have nothing to bitch about this thing other than moving the 10 feet over on the other side of the driveway. She can put 16 feet on the other side of the driveway. I just like to keep these people come in, they've been parking there for years in that area. I've had the house for 40 years, and they've assumed parking there, and that's what's happened. And I'm only just trying to, these people don't want to have to cross the street, because what happens is they'll come in from somewhere, there'll be people from the beauty parlor parked there, so they have to look around. They usually park on that side or somewhere. So it makes a inconvenient to my tenants who live on that side of the street.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second and try and look at this somewhat logically. So prior to any of this, you had 2 parking spaces, correct?
I had two.
Two,
Yeah, I had
between
two.
your property
Right, I had
and,
two.
and
Two,
there were
right.
2 parking
Correct.
spaces. With this proposal, you only lose 1. I'm just,
Yeah, right, you're losing one.
but you gain 2 across the street.
Well, in game, if I'm losing one, I'm
Well, you gain 2
basically
across the street, which gives you a net gain of 1.
One.
So you went from 2 parking spaces to 3.
one, right.
To 3. Theoretically, the people on Stafford Road, if you hadn't gained the 2 on the other side and it stayed the way it is, they could take those 2 parking spaces if they had company, correct? I mean, there's nothing to stop them from, they could park on either side of Chicago Street,
Right.
in other words.
Right,
So the fact that you gain 2 parking spaces from the traffic, Mrs. Ferrera going out, I don't think created a problem. I think it alleviated a problem, because there are more options now.
well, it's a problem that people complain where they're living there. They've been there for years, and I've never had a parking problem. People now complain to me, say, why should I have to park over across the street or whatever? I mean, I'm saying they were parking on my side of the street where the house is.
So then my next question would be, and what did they do during a parking ban?
So, well,
Because they
have-
couldn't park on that side of the
They
street.
had, well, during the parking ban, it's an emergency, they had to go to the other side of the street, which was less parking,
Which now has more parking.
well,
Because they
not
just
more.
opened
When
up-
that parking ban, they couldn't park there anyways.
Correct, correct.
Right.
So I think that's part of what I'm getting at. So you've lost 1, I'm just, in this scenario, you lose 1 space, but you gain 2 with a net gain of 1. So now, when they couldn't park at all during a parking ban, now they have 2 spots across the street they can park in during a parking ban. So you gained during
during a-
a snow emergency, in other words.
Okay.
Right?
Well, that's.
I mean, do we agree on that
yeah,
much?
Yeah, how many times do we have to diffuse it?
Technically, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
technically.
However, the two houses on Stafford Road, they only have room for 2 cars. So they got 4 cars right there. So if they have any company, the company either tries to block their driveway, or they can move over here. Now, they moved the stop sign, no parking from here to corner. They moved it about 14 feet towards the west side, okay? That left room for 4 cars to go there, because there's 1 car there now, and I calculated it out today with a tape measure, and there's about 60 feet. Telephone poles are 100 feet apart. After that, you have two-car driveways.
They have it on that plan.
That's 26 and 40. Then, across the street from Mrs. Aruta's house, you had 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. 3, yeah, that's the sum.
Well, none of that is changing.
I know.
Only a
No,
small
no, no,
portion.
No, but what you're not getting at this. The problem is, this is the south side of the street. 2 hydrants. For sure, you're not gonna be able to park there. And on
All
this
right,
side.
excuse me 1 second. Mrs. Ferrero, would you please join us? Because I think that you can add to this significantly.
That was a rockin' and a rollin'.
Okay, so when we moved the sign closer to the corner, it allowed, as Mr. Aguirre said, 40 more feet, so 2 cars were able to. And we had to be careful, because Chicago is a one-way. So if any large trucks have to make that turn, the beauty salon has time signs, okay? So we had to make sure that, as a matter of fact, we used one of my guy's truck that would have made that turn. If there was a car parked right where I put the sign, no parking here corner, it wouldn't be an issue, and there wasn't. That's why we were able to push back as much as we can. Now, regarding the beauty salon, they do have time signs. They're not open every day. Their time has certain days to certain hours. So anytime after 2 or 3 o'clock when the beauty shop is closed, those spaces will become available to whoever lives there. But this is an issue that we have throughout the city. We can't tell people where to park. It's a public way. Visitors, anybody in the city that has a home that is very hard to park, that live on a street that's very hard to park, if they have a party, I get calls every day. So that's something that we can't fix. But I agree with opening the 2 more spaces. It actually gave them 2 spaces that they never had before.
But those 2 spaces should be allocated for these 2 houses on Stafford Road.
But you can't do that.
Stafford
It's a-
Road houses have their own driveways
Yeah.
But that's the driveway.
with 2 vehicles,
Yes,
with
they
2
get
parking
any-
spaces
they get
in
any
accordance
pub-
with zoning.
They get any, no,
Where
company,
do people go when they
where
go,
they
they
gonna
get
park?
company?
They,
Same
they're
place,
gonna park
where
around the
they can
corner.
park in the park, anywhere that they want.
excuse me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know any house in the city of Fall River that has guaranteed parking spaces on the street for anybody to park in. I have a neighbor who has a driveway that fits 3 cars. In the past, he's been known to park 1 in the driveway and 2 directly across the street from my house. And there's nothing I can say or do about that. And he has a driveway that fits 3 vehicles. So I think unfortunately, that doesn't play into this scenario. Because there is no such thing as you build a house and get a guaranteed parking space on the street. You know, if the beauty salon people are parked there and those people have company,
Okay,
well,
let's-
sorry about that.
We have a business over there. Well, she's at 2 o'clock. He closes sometimes 6 o'clock at night in there. So people come home from work at 3:30, 4 o'clock. They can't go there, so they have to look, they have to look around and then they don't want to have to move their car at night after they park their car. So, which you say, there's no guarantee, but the beauty parlor needs a lot more parking place than it didn't have any problems because there was basically an open neighborhood. There was no houses across the street. Now, everybody with houses across the street makes it very difficult for them to, they come in and park. And and it's open on Saturdays, and it's packed, the wall-to-wall cars on Saturdays. He had a business for 40 years there, never had, all of a sudden now we have to change it. You know, I've had a business, I owned a place for 40 years, I never had a problem. So I see this totally changing where it shouldn't, he should have the right to be able to, so people come in and park there. Anybody, like you say, can park anywhere, so they park.
So let's assume that none of this is allowed, and she has to put in a driveway that goes the other direction. What do you gain?
What do I gain?
What do you gain?
I gain 2 parking places over here.
Well, you
That
don't-
anybody can use.
But you don't gain 2
Well,
parking
well,
spaces.
well,
You have one here and one between her 2 driveways, if this goes through, which is 2 parking spaces. If it goes the other way, this parking space just moves over here, and you still have 2 parking spaces. So you're not gaining or losing any parking.
Wouldn't it be better to move the driveway up further?
But she's still gonna lose a space
She's gonna lose 1 space, but she.
on the street, just like she's gonna lose now.
On the east side of the house.
Right, so if she puts a new driveway on this side,
Yeah, put the driveway
She's gonna
on the
lose a
east
spot
side
here.
of the house.
which is still a spot in that neighborhood. So right now, your customers could park here, on the easterly side of her driveway.
Yes,
So if she puts the driveway over here, that's gonna eat up one of the spaces that they could potentially be using now, on the easterly side of her driveway.
Right.
It's still a loss of a parking space.
Right, and I'm actually in need of parking place. I don't want to lose a parking place.
You're not going to. You gained one.
I gained one because essentially, but is I gained one, but there's other people, like they say, they can park anywhere. So the people on Stafford Road are looking for parking places too, so they can just park on Chicago Street. You said that nobody can stop people who park whatever they want. So
Correct.
That's assuming now they need parking, they're gonna park on Chicago Street. Where else are they gonna park if they get company?
and another
And
thing.
another thing is I have off-street parking, but I need a place for 5 cars for the building, 5 off-street parking spots. And now the beauty parlor, he's got 2, I think, and he parks in one, so there's 1. Or sometimes he doesn't park in one, he'll park up further up on the street.
So
Well,
Madam
what
Chair,
happens is-
Chairperson, just looking at that, just speaking to that, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is the boat still there?
Yeah,
So you're taking up a spot in your driveway for a boat,
right,
and we're complaining about off-street.
Is somebody that lives there?
yeah.
Oh, in
They
that
lived in
house?
that building, they said they had the boat, and they said, can I put it there for a
All
while?
right, but do you see how hypocritical it sounds when we're complaining about off-street parking, and we're
I'll have
saying
to
that
move the boat out
it's
there. I'll take
allocation
it.
and that
Well,
you
then
need
that's in
it?
that too.
But do you- but-
You already got this made mud up. so
No,
do whatever you wanna do.
well, I think we,
This is just-
Mr. Savigny, with all due respect, I think we're trying to work with the neighborhood, we're trying to work with the applicant, and we're just, no matter what option we submit, it's still not meeting your expectations. And we're hearing about parking, and I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest that parking is an issue when we've got a boat in a parking lot, right? So I'm trying to do the right thing, I'm trying to work with everybody, but I just don't appreciate when we're making arguments and we've got a boat in a parking lot and you're telling me that you need more parking. That's just disingenuous across the board.
Even if I discount that, it's 4 parking places I need off-street parking.
But we've gained in this whole discussion, and then I understand that Mr. Aguirre and Ms. Ferrera had clearly articulated that we would have gained that spot regardless of what would have transpired if somebody had made the telephone call. Obviously, this all came about because we were having the conversation, we sent those folks back out to look at it, so we've gained an additional parking spot. So I think the neighborhood is in a better position in terms of where we are. So I'm ready, instead of dragging this conversation on, I'm ready to make a motion that we approve option 2. And this really meets the need of the individual. We still have that parking spot. We've got a 4-foot buffer between Mr. Savigny's property and the driveway, and we have those 2 additional ones. So that's my motion.
Can I make a motion? I can't make a vote, but I prefer if you want, I have to, I'm gonna be stuck with option 1 would be better for me.
Mrs. Ferrer, did you have a comment to make? I know you before you wanted to speak.
No, I was just going to say the 2 spots that we opened up, I understand that the clients from the hair salon use it, but when those spots weren't there, they were parking further up on Chicago Street. So in a way, it helped a little bit better, because now they have those two spots, which opens up spots further into people's homes. So it kind of washes one with the other. That's what I wanted to explain.
And also, I believe at our last meeting that, Mr. Savigny, that you also, at that meeting, made the statement that as long as you had a buffer between her driveway and your driveway, that you were okay with that at the last meeting,
What-
having
what-
the buffer.
Having the buffer, like option one would, I don't, that's okay, I'll live with option one. That's the buffer there. That's what you,
Before-
what Mr. Aguirre came up with originally, he said with a 10-foot side onto the driveway. And that's what the original proposal was.
No, the original proposal was for a 16-foot curb cut horseshoe.
Right.
Well, no, you had said, when then you came in, you have an
That
option to
was,
go to either
no,
side.
that was
That was-
Councilor Kadim's
Okay,
idea.
Kadeem's idea, okay.
Which has
I-
been reduced to a 10-foot.
Right, a 10-foot.
So she's given up 6 feet in her proposal and reduced it to a 10-foot,
And-
which gave you the buffer between her driveway and your property.
That's option one, am I right?
No, that was in option 2. In option 2, I believe this is pretty much her original request, on where it says 10 feet, originally that was going to be 16 feet.
That's correct, but she just hadn't provided a sketch.
Correct.
And that's when I had said that you should have a sketch.
So
for
Mr.
that.
Aguirre amended it to 10 feet, which gave you the buffer between her driveway and your driveway that you requested, which still leaves 3 parking spaces where before there were only 2. Is that all correct? Yes.
From the hydrant on the south side, there's room for 4 cars. 2 for the beauty shop and 2 prior to Ronnie's driveway. Because today, I was there. There was a car parked and the mail truck come in. And he pulled in and he parked there. He's not in the 2 parks here, he's ahead of it. So,
And that's not going to change.
no, that's not gonna change. If Mrs. Aruda puts the driveway on the east side of her property, it will line up with the big gate that she has in the back of the property. So if she wants to put a boat anywhere, she could just back the boat in and go here. She's not disturbing any of the vegetation or whatever the trees that she has on the west side of her house. And all it is grass, and she's got a 2 gate in the back there that leads to you can see it from Emmett Street. So if you put a driveway on the east side of the house, that will save a lot of problems. And then you could.
I guess, if I have to be 100% honest, I'm not quite understanding the problems, in the respect that whether you go with proposal number 1 or proposal number 2, you're still losing 1 parking space. It's still the same number of feet for the driveways
Correct.
in the end result.
20 feet.
So there's no, so nothing's changing. It's still 3 parking spaces. And again, granted, it could have happened regardless, but it didn't happen until this proposal came before us. You have the 2 parking spaces across the street now that you did not have before. So before you had 4 parking spaces, now, no matter what configuration, you have 5. Now, is it fair to say, when the beauty salon is open, the chances of somebody having company on Stafford Road are slim to none, because presumably the people are working during the day?
But this is on weekends.
That by the time,
Weekends is when they have the people in.
okay,
He has
and
six.
weekends, the people who live there are already parked?
Not all the time, I mean,
So-
I don't monitor it.
Yeah, but it
So-
doesn't interfere.
And I don't understand how this works, but so you have some dedicated signs,
For the beauty
times
salon,
for
yes.
beauty salon of 2
Yes.
spaces?
Yes,
What would be the procedure for getting additional? Is that possible?
for them to get more space.
Additional time-restricted spaces, theoretically, for the spots across the street. they could go through that process if they chose to.
But if you do that,
For Saturdays between 7
Well, I-
and 3, for the 2 spaces across the street, could you also
you can
restrict
do
those?
that, but then you're gonna hurt the neighborhood because now it's only gonna be available for the beauty salon, so we're
For
right
that
back.
Saturday time period.
Right, so you're
But
right
then it
back
would be
to-
open the rest of, but Mr. Svigny, it would be his right if he wanted to go through that motion and attempt to have that area signs.
The only-
It's gonna have to go through your office,
Right,
and you're
the
gonna say
only
yes or
thing-
no, but he is
Yeah.
afforded that right if he chooses to do that.
The traffic board won't approve
Okay.
more time
No.
signs. They try to limit one to a business, 2 spaces to a business.
But it wouldn't stop them from trying.
No, it's more than welcome to, it would be whoever runs the spot.
Well, if I can only ask if, I don't know, my thing is, if we gotta go with it, option 1 to me is
Before, Mrs. Ruda, do you have any comments you'd like to make before we complete this? Sure.
The whole reason why I did this, like I stated for the first meeting, was just to create more parking for, like he said, if we have company, visitors, I have all that land. I'm paying a mortgage on, I'm paying taxes on, there's nothing there. It's a waste of space. So if I can have an open curb cut of 10 feet, that's all I'm asking for. People come to my house, they park right in there. He's gonna have plenty of parking. That's the whole reason why I'm doing it. So if I don't have this, people come to my house to visit, they're parking on the street. He has less spaces. To me, this is a no-brainer. I have the land. Why not use it?
So what you're saying is, at the present time, when you get company, they park on the
Yeah,
street in front of your house?
for example, for
If
Easter,
this is approved, your company will park in your driveway.
of course, right now they're already jumping the grass. We're making it work, we're sticking it in there somehow, I have that land, like I said, what's the point of me paying a mortgage? Why am I paying taxes if I have this land that's just sitting there and it's not even being used?
Council Kadim, do you have any more comments?
No.
And your motion was
Option number 2.
option number 2.
Next page.
I really, at this point, with what's gone back and forth and transpired, and the number of spaces, I don't see any difference in any of it at this point. I'll second your motion. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I know, but it's after you and I to discuss. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or we can talk about it otherwise. Thank you.
It makes more sense to put a driveway on the east side of her house. She can have the whole driveway, and it'll lead up to that fence that she's got with the gate, and she can park the boat behind the gate.
Okay,
Don't have to worry about that.
we just voted, and we voted on option 2.
Thank you.
Are you staying for our next,
I think,
for
is it 4 or
Small
5?
Street?
4. Sorry.
Small, the next one? Yeah, I am, yeah.
Number 4, final report. Acceptance of Small Street extending from President Avenue to a dead end, and also 280 feet of Stanley Street extending from Small Street to Naaman Street, tabled on 7/20/21. Entertain a motion from the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No one opposed. Now, I believe there was an original plan, then it was asked to be amended.
Right, so I can give you a little bit of a history lesson. So
Okay.
this was week 1. There was a folder on my desk, one of the only folders that was street acceptances, and Small Street was the first one. So as I read through the different motions and recommendations that the council had passed down, initially, this was for Small Street only. And this is a copy of the ultimate plan that was prepared in accordance with that, so that you can all get an idea of what we're talking about. So here's President Avenue at the bottom of the plan, small street runs north. Spencer Borden School directly adjacent to it, and then there's Stanley Street that connects to Damon Street. So Damon Street is also constructed. Stanley Street is not constructed, nothing there. So the asphalt in Small Street ends right at the end of this layout. And as you can see, some of the parking and landscaping for Spencer Borden, after the surveyed plan was done, actually falls within Stanley Street. So what ended up happening was, the commission initially made the recommendation to send it to planning to look at small. During that discussion with the planning board, I was not present at that meeting, but there was some type of a discussion, and someone had made the recommendation or the idea, well, why don't we do small and Stanley? Not necessarily looking into, well, what are we taking if we take Stanley? If you take Stanley, you need to construct Stanley. The city would be responsible for constructing Stanley, removing some parking spaces, removing this fence, but neither the committee or the planning board knew that at that time. So the paperwork continued on. It came back to you with that recommendation from the planning board. The city council then made the recommendation to take both streets. Again, unknowing that these situations happen. Goes to the engineering department. It goes out to have the plan prepared by a surveyor. Prepare the plan, submit it back. At that point, the taking ended. I believe the engineer left at around that time, the previous city engineer, so he had been sitting on the desk. So first week of February, I had reached out to Colleen and said, where do we stand with this? There was also an issue at some point in time during a butter notification, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a second, that one of the homeowners, whether it was Mr. Almeida or Mr. Stroney, Mrs. Stroney, when they were alerted to the fact that this was happening, was opposed to the fact that Stanley Street was now going to be potentially accepted and constructed, where their input was not sought out previously. So what we would like to do, and whatever I believe the proper channel is for you now to send this back to planning for a new recommendation. You can't just take it upon the council to do it. Planning would then now send it back to you with a recommendation to only take small, which I think is the proper way to do it. I'm learning this as I go, but I'm learning that is the case. And so again, when I'm reviewing this file from when we started, this whole process of accepting streets to become public ways needs to be, I think, looked at a little bit more closely. For instance, when I look at this and...
Do they have a public hearing?
Yes.
They held a public hearing?
They did. So they followed protocol,
Okay.
not an issue. And again, you can just tell by the text how old this document is. And this is the document that starts the process by a number of signatures of 10 legal voters in the city of Fall River. Any 10 legal voters can petition this process to begin. These are all by people that live on Free Love, some on President Avenue, Charlotte, New Boston Road, Hyacinth. So not necessarily people that have a stake in these roads. Normally, in other municipalities, when we're dealing with, whether it's a private way for acceptance or anything, it's usually the people on the street itself are involved in the petition for this acceptance. So I don't think that happens. And then two, it's also allowed only by voters. They don't have to be taxpayers, they don't have to own property, they don't have to own property on the street. So that's just what stops the process. So in the last two that I've dealt with, like Glendale being one of them, which I think is kind of in front of you as well, I think the city needs to look closely at what kind of a headache are we buying? Because that's what you're doing, is you're buying this piece of real estate and you are now responsible for the repair, the upkeep, and the maintenance of this street. And they don't come to you when they're in good shape. Like a new subdivision street, it's brand new. They've been reviewed for construction, they've gone through the permitting process. You can take those streets knowing full well that it's been constructed to a standard that's acceptable. You're buying time bombs, is what you're really buying when you're taking or accepting these streets. And I know these people pay the right same amount of taxes, but they want the services and everything else, and that's how we get there. But I think there needs to be a little bit closer attention paid either on the planning department side, which I'm hoping to help, so when this is presented to them, they fully understand that it's not just 2 lines of a street layout and you're taking it and everything is great. There's a lot that comes with that. Some are better and some are worse. So they need to understand the financial responsibility of, okay, if we take Small Street, roadway reconstruction, for instance, is about $350 a foot. So if we're at 328 feet times $350 a foot, about $100,000 to rebuild Small Street. So that's immediately what's going to happen, or requested to have happen. So we can't necessarily burden ourselves with, we have streets that we own now that we can't fix because we don't have enough money. So to increase that number sometimes isn't necessarily the best thing to do. So I don't know if this process will ever change, but as I'm involved, I will at least alert that fact to the planning board, and whenever a recommendation is asked of me is, you can take any street you want, but just understand the ramifications of it after you make this vote. So on this one, for instance, I don't think anybody looked into, we're gonna have to rebuild Stanley. Now that's, $350 is reconstructed the street. To build a new one, you're over $500 a linear foot. So that's what needs to be looked at. So I would ask that you recommend to the council to recommend back to the planning board to look just at Small and not deal with Stanley. The plans that have been prepared, we won't have to prepare new ones, so we've already been through that, and the engineering department is paid for these, just with the actual taking document that follows in these items. What would happen is we are only going to take, Stanley Street can show up, but it's still a public way, a private way. Small Street could potentially be taken. And I don't have Small Street is not in that bad of condition. I do believe that for the access that it provides, it should be taken. So this isn't one of those that it's, this pothole infested gravel road in the middle of nowhere that serves one home, and the city's gonna take this huge expense. It does provide access for 4 different homes. Theoretically, if it had to, another fire access to the school. So there's a lot of different things that play into this street. So I do think, if asked by the planning board, yes, the taking of Small Street would be acceptable to me. That's all.
Councilor
Chairwoman,
Kadim?
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the full council that we refer this back to planning for a recommendation and a public hearing.
Mrs. Ferrera?
I just want to comment on something. So when that came about to make that into a public way, we did receive calls from the residents that they were very concerned because of the Spencer boarding teachers who were parking on Small Street. We were able to get them out because it was a private way. They were very concerned that if it becomes a public way, it's open to teachers, parents, and they were really, really concerned about that. So I know I mentioned that in the letter when I received that they were going to make that into a public place. So that's another thing we need to think about, that, if this goes further, these residents will mention that.
I mean,
But to that point, I think that's what the public hearing would be for, so
Right.
the abutters would get a notification, and I think at that time, the planning board would take that under advisement, and then when it comes back to the council, we can make sure that we highlight that
and taking of the street and fixing it, you still have the ability to make it no parking, if that's enough of a problem.
Well, that was, the talk was to make the west side no parking.
Okay.
So that way they wouldn't be, when it was a snowstorm or anything, no one would park there. So that was one of their conditions that they asked if that could be done as well.
And we did have 2 individuals, July 15th, that were opponents of the proposal as well. One is here. Hello. If
Hey,
you'd like
Mr.
to speak,
Stroni.
sir?
There you go.
The problem is, when schools, there are too many schools.
go to the mic?
Sorry.
Can you please state your name and
My
address
name
for
is
the
Thomas
record?
E. Stromey. The problem is, there are so many schools in the college in that area that it backs up traffic. It gets to the point where across the street, where CVS is and McDonald's, they hire police officers to stop the people from parking in there, which makes the congestion on Ellsbury Street even that much worse, because there are a couple of access to President Avenue from the parking area. If they allow parking and they allow the streets to go through, there are a tremendous amount of people that drive down the street, turn around because there's no access. And if you cut off the Ellsbury and President Avenue, that's just going to congest the area even more, because people will never get out from Ellsbury Street through the traffic, because the high schools is getting out, both Conley and Durfee, and then the colleges get off at a different time. Plus, Spencer Barn is just up the street. So that area between 2 o'clock and 3:30 is highly congested. If you allow access to the side streets, it's just gonna cause more confusion. We still have people who go down the street and it's a dead end, and they don't even know where to go. They stop in the middle of the street, they go over the dirt, they go everywhere.
Are there no parking signs now, Laura? No.
No.
So, once it becomes a city street, we could put a dead end sign? So, dead end, not a through street, there can be additional signage to help, alleviate the issues that are occurring there now.
So your concern was if they were gonna go through to Stanley, not if it remained a dead end?
Correct.
Okay, so if that's one problem that
Right,
we're
if
already,
you go down the street, it doesn't matter. If it's Damon Street, there's no place to go. They have to turn around and access back out onto President Avenue, which backs up everything because they try to sneak out. So you have the west and eastbound traffic, and street lanes going east and 2 going west. It just backs everything up to the point where nobody moves. They just cannot move at all.
so Mr. Aguirre's already addressed that issue.
Yes, he
That-
And potentially at Damon, I don't know what signage is there for dead end, not a throughway.
I know
We'll take a look at it.
Small
has
has
a
it,
dead end.
I don't think Damon
Damon,
Street
yeah,
does.
I'd have to look at Damon to see what it has. I
Okay.
mean, dead ends we can put, even though it's a private way, I just can't put any time signs or anything like that.
Okay, so there was a motion, there was a second, everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Nobody opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Great,
adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.